not be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein.
Blood defiles the land. This land we standing on is defiled by Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian blood. And you cannot cleanse the land of the blood that's shed therein, but by what?
But by the blood of him that shed it.
Is the man that shed this blood here today? No? Is he here today? No? Is his blood still here today? Yes, because it runs through you, and it runs through you.
The letter J wasn't invented till 400 years ago. You should have known that. So why you calling him Jesus? What does he think when he sees us? I gotta rest on the Sabbath, even though I am a savage. You eating pork is a habit. Coronavirus a panic. Gotta wear your mask in public. Democratic, how you love it. It ain't about you, it's the money. Now I'm cooking, start the oven. Spirit cooking what they into. Blood gang like the menstrual. Now I'm talking to your mantle. Pen or pencil, pick utensil. Better go follow commandments, unless they were not given to your nation. Contradiction in your habits, even your prayers abomination. I was trying to live life like tightrope on a lifeline. Yahweh knew I was built for this, so he put me through the furnace. Now I'm feeling like killing 9 needle mites at a time with the anger of a slave. Hit you with the Bible, then I read the scripture as I flip the page. Ain't no telling what the Ruach got in store for me. When I'm with him, I am not lonely. Kill a demon, leave a widow. When you speak his name, I told you that it's not a riddle. It's Exodus 3:14. I am that I am, yeah. Exodus 3:14. I am that I am, yeah. Do it for Issachar, do it for my people. Do it for Issachar, do it for my people. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. They told you that white guy was Jesus. Well, that was a lie. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. They told you that white guy was Jesus. Well, that was a lie. I ain't gon' cut it to you any other way. If you living in sin, then you gon' probably die. Cops are killing us in broad daylight. Don't you know that it's a homicide? I'm just waiting for Hamashiach. You just counting what Takashi got. In this matrix, you are polygon. I'm a spirit when your body's gone. Pull up on me, I got Bible on me. Babylon, they eating that baloney. Idol worship, I do not condone it. Work on Sabbath, then you acting phony. End times, that prophecy. You calcified, but I could see. You voting for democracy. Reptilian philosophy. Goddamn dust and Deuteronomy. At the bottom of economy. Israel is who they wanna be. Edomites aren't really fond of me. I was in ocean when it was split. I was escaping my nemesis. Look in the ocean for evidence. Still 89 and it's ever since. You are the blood of your ancestors. Live by the sword and you die by the sword. Guess what? I'm ambidextrous. Living so close to the eye of the storm. Say his name how it's supposed to be. Exodus will expose the weak. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, get close to me. Exodus 3:14. I am that I am, yeah. Exodus 3:14. I am that I am, yeah. Do it for Issachar, do it for my people. Do it for Issachar, do it for my people. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. They told you that white guy was Jesus. Well, that was a lie. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. They told you that white guy was Jesus. Well, that was a lie.
Shalom, shalom, Yasharallah. First off, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High, Yahweh, and I do so in the name of His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai. Shalom to all the brethren and all the sisters out there tuning in. So this lesson is going to be called Indigenous Native Americans and Mexicans are Hebrew Israelites. We're going to go over some history, some archaeology, and some scripture, as well as a lot of references and books that y'all could check out on your own, right? So the reason I'm doing this lesson is just to give some knowledge and some wisdom and some insight on the fact that so-called Native Americans and so-called people that are indigenous to this land actually are Israelites, right? So I'm going to start with Job 8 and 8. It says, "For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers." Right? So this is just one way that we can search and see who some of our fathers, our forefathers were, and who we are as a people, right? So this is Sirach 5 and 15. "Be not ignorant of anything in a great matter or small," right? So some people say it's not important. Some people say we don't really need to know about it. Um, but like the scriptures say, we're not to be ignorant of anything in a great matter or a small matter, right? So let me just give a disclaimer really quick, right? I'm not saying that the indigenous people of the Americas are the only Israelites. I'm not saying all of the so-called Hispanics, Mexicans, Native Americans are Israelites, right? I'm just saying that there is an amount of them, a diaspora of them, a remnant of them that are of Israel, right? Not all of them carried on that seed line. A lot of them, just like so-called African Americans, have Edomite or other nations blood or seed line running through them, right? So it always comes down to the spirit as opposed to carnal. So this is Romans 8 and 16. "The spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High," right? So in the end, the spirit always does bear witness, but we're just going to go over a lot of references to see and to show y'all that without a doubt, the natives and indigenous of this land were of um, what they like to call Jewish, but we know the descent of the real Jews, the Hebrew Israelites, right? See the comments. Success journey, shalom, shalom. Yeah, I saw this comment. So there's a comment here from, it says from 3:10 p.m. It says, this is young Christian camp doctrine. Y'all not Israel. They made that all up in New York almost over 70 years ago. Y'all still pushing this same nonsense the Mormons believe in, right? So the first thing I would say is, or actually I'm gonna let the scripture speak, right? Let's go to Sirach 11, 7 and 8, right? Sirach 11 and 7, it says, "Blame not before thou hast examined the truth, understand first, and then rebuke," right? We're about to examine some of the truth. All right. You want to rebuke after that? That's fine with me. "Answer not before thou hast heard the cause, neither interrupt men in the midst of their talk." So he's not interrupting me, right? But you get the point. The point is, you need to hear the cause first, right? Whoever told you that natives aren't Israel, the first thing I would ask you is, who are they then, right? Because you have to understand that the only reason you're saying that is because you heard that from somebody else, right? You heard that from somebody else, and instead of looking into it yourself, you probably just took someone's word for it, right? This is Proverbs 14 and 15. It says, "The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his goings." Okay? You can't just believe every word you hear. You can't be shaken about with every wind of doctrine, like the scriptures say. All right? Let me get one more verse. Proverbs 18 and 13. "He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." Right? When you're this message says it's from what time? 3:10 p.m. I don't know if y'all can see that. It says 3:10 p.m. All right, that message was from 3:10 p.m. Probably right when I posted up I was going to do this lesson, and you're already saying you're already saying that this is nonsense, right? And that's all made up, and it's almost over 70 years old, right? So let's hear the matter, right? Let's hear the matter, and not let it be foolishness and shame to you to answer before, right? So I'm gonna start with the video um of this news host, right? He used to be on Fox News. They took him off for obvious reasons after you see the video, right? After you see parts of this video. His name is Glenn Beck, and he had a little phase there where he was really into getting into the Native American history and culture and things of that nature, right? So I'm just gonna play probably a minute or two, a couple minutes of clips, and then we'll get into the lesson, right? So y'all let me know if y'all can't hear it or if it's breaking up or something.
However, not everybody thought Indians were primitive savages with no brains. George Washington loved the Indians. Thomas Jefferson had a very different view of Native Americans. In 1784, he dug out on his property a 12-foot high mound. It was something that he couldn't figure out. He found several complex layers of burials. He concluded that the mound was the work of Indian ancestors. Jefferson began to ponder this, and he believed that the Indians possibly came, in his words, from Egypt or Asia. He looked at some of the ancient writings. He compared them. He was fascinated with language. He compared Egyptian and Indian. He started to say, well, you know what? They're not as primitive as everybody thinks. Well, Jefferson, in many circles towards the late part of the 1700s, was attacked for his beliefs. He was called a howling atheist because of some of them. But John Adams was not one of them. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson did have a dispute on the American native, but it wasn't that they weren't savages. In their famous correspondence that happened in later years, they talked about the Native American and discussed James Adair's intriguing theory that the Indians were descendant from Jews because they had, according to Thomas Jefferson and Adair, the same laws, the same ceremonies, the same sacrifice, the same priests, prophets, and fast. Even the Indian dialect seemed derived from a common prototype of the Hebrew Bible. So they didn't brush off the Native American as wild animals. They were intrigued.
So I'm gonna pause it there, right? So hopefully y'all caught that. So he basically is saying that John Adams, right, and Thomas Jefferson, so we're talking about more than 300 years ago, right, that they would have discussions. They even wrote letters back and forth to each other, right? And they were saying that some of the Native Americans descended from Jews, all right? They said that they had the same laws, the same ceremonies, the same sacrifices, the same types of priests, prophets, fasts, holy days, and dialects like Hebrew, right? Like the old Hebrew, what is known as either Phoenician, some people call it Canaanite Hebrew, right? The ancient Hebrew, which we're gonna get into right now. I'm gonna show y'all a few of the discoveries that they made, right? So let me jump forward a little bit.
He teaches about Native Americans. And I want you to know this part of our history because people erased it. We'll get to that later on in the program. Erased it intentionally. That's an important part of it. America's history didn't begin with Christopher Columbus came over. There were ancient cities.
Salakia. So he said, remember this, he said that they intentionally erased this history. Okay, and later on, I probably won't show that part, but later on he goes and says why. It's because they wanted to conquer this land. And of course, it would have been a lot harder or a lot less acceptable to conquer a land that was actually inhabited by the Most High's chosen people. All right, so I'm going to keep letting it play.
With advanced architectures all across North America. Did you know that? Hundreds of years before Columbus came. I always think, oh, the Indians, they didn't scar the land. No, not true. These were cities as large as any in the world at the time, London or Rome. They were metropolises. Archaeologists say they have found evidence of 200,000 actual cities of mound-like structures all across North America.
So he's saying they found evidence of 200,000 cities all across North America, right? Pre-Columbus, before 1492, which we know the natives were the ones who built these cities.
That were here long before Columbus. But we don't know anything about them. Why? Why? Especially when you hear what you're about to hear. I want to show you 3 incredible examples of these Indian mounds that were discovered. But before I show you this, I want to ask yourself, I want you to ask these questions. Was Jackson right? Andrew Jackson, Manifest Destiny, the beginning of that. Was he right that the Native Americans were savages? Or was Jefferson right that there was something going on here that we don't even understand? Maybe they were descendants of Egyptians or Jews, or maybe they were from Asia. Where were these people from? But they weren't savages. I want you to take a look at this. It's going to blow your mind. See this here? First, let me show you the Great Pyramid of Giza. Seen this? One side of the Great Pyramid of Giza. If you measure it, it is from the bottom to the apex, 606 feet. That's important. That's an ancient unit of measurement. It's referred to as the stade. Now I want to show you this. These are the Newark earthworks. They're here in Ohio. Yes, Ohio. The earthworks are made, they're structures that are made now of earth that has been built up from the ground in a perfect circle. Here it is, a perfect circle and a perfect octagon. But they were built by the ancient Hopewell civilization. They date back from 300 BC to 400 AD. So let's look at these structures here. Bring this up. I want to show you something. If you square the inside of the octagon, here's a square and here's a square. If you square it, this is what surveyors do when they're measuring. They square the circle, and then they divide that area into 4 equal parts, or cubes, and then you find that each cube
I'm gonna play the next video. It's continued on, right?
is made up of 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet, 606 feet, 606. It's made up of stades, exactly the same. Now, if that's not interesting enough, look at the angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza. If you take the angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza, the slope is 51.8 degrees. Let's go back to the earthworks. If you measure the line that goes straight through the center of the structure, right here, and then you'll go true north, it's 51.8 degrees. That angle is exactly the same angle as the pyramids of Giza. It is the same math, the same calculations as ancient Egyptians. Let me show you one more connection. In 1860, David Wyrick, he's a guy who surveyed the Newark earthworks. He was digging into a mound.
So I'm gonna pause it right there, and then I'll play probably another minute or two. But hopefully y'all caught that. So it's saying, so the question I would have for y'all then is who built the pyramids in Egypt, right? Who built the pyramids in Egypt? There's a nowadays there's a lot of people trying to say, or there's a lot of information out there that's trying to say that the Salakia, let me exit out of this real quick. Said my connection was getting slow. There's a lot of information out there saying or trying to prove that the Hebrews that were enslaved, you know, when Moses and the Exodus, before the Exodus was there, that they weren't the ones who built the pyramids, right? But if you see, there's a lot of information out there that's older that say that it was the so-called slaves, which we know the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, that built the pyramids, right? You even have what's the Disney movie called? I think it's Prince of Egypt, the cartoon movie where it had the Hebrew Israelites building pyramids and things of that nature, right? So you have to understand when he's saying that these pyramids that were in Egypt, right? The measurement they used was a state. It was 606 feet. That was a common calculation, a common measurement, like how we have a yardstick now, right? And not only that, but also the degree at which it sloped was 51.8 degrees, right? That's a very precise measurement. And then in Ohio, when you have these mounds, right, that the Native Americans made, it was the exact same measurement, right? So that's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence at all. So I'm gonna keep going and let this play probably for another minute or two, and then I'll bring up some references and things of that nature.
Hi, Rick. He's a guy who surveyed the Newark earthworks. He was digging into a mound near those earthworks, and he found a wooden coffin made of oak. They opened up the coffin and found a skeleton of a man holding a little box that was about 8.10 inches in size. The box had been cemented shut here. This, by the way, is sitting in Ohio. Well, he opened up the box and he found a little man inside, a little black stone. They took it to scholars and they looked at it. The man seems to be carrying something, and there's writing here. At first, they couldn't recognize. The writing is, they thought in 1860, some sort of Hebrew. Well, finally, about 20 years later, they found some rabbis living in the area, and the rabbis looked at that, and they could read it. They said it was an old kind of block Hebrew, and it was a rendition of the Ten Commandments. Now, this is another piece. Block Hebrew. They said they'd never seen anything like it. Mainstream archaeologists at the time called this a hoax. But then in 1900, or just about after 1900, in Israel, they found the same block-style Hebrew writing. Mainstream archaeologists still dismissed the findings. They found it in Israel, and they found it in Ohio. But there was another stone that they found that they couldn't argue. This is the Bat Creek stone. It was found during the course of an official Smithsonian evacuation. The Smithsonian didn't understand the meaning of the writing on the stone. They thought it was Cherokee since it came from Cherokee country. They didn't realize that it's actually Hebrew. They had published this originally upside down. They threw it in a box at the bottom of the Smithsonian, put it in the basement. Many years later, a scholar took it out of the box, looked at it, and went, oh my gosh, it's upside down. It's Phoenician, ancient Hebrew. So what's going on here? What is that about? Where is that history? I'll show you in a few minutes, and we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to show you some more things that the Smithsonian, science, government, commerce colluded to erase. By the way, I want to thank the directors of the documentary Lost.
So he said science, the government, the Smithsonian, right? They colluded, they worked together to try to erase and discredit all of this information, right? So why would they try to work together to do that? Because as always, they try to remove the evidence of the real children of Israel, right? They don't want that information to come out, because imagine if all the so-called Native Americans and indigenous people to this continent found that out, right? If they're giving the whole, if they made the Balfour Declaration, right, to give the land of Israel to a bunch of convert Jewish people, imagine what would happen or what they would have to do if they found out that the indigenous people of this land were actually the real children of Israel, right? So I'm gonna pull up a couple verses real quick. And then I'll get into some more information, right? So like he said, though, they worked together in order to do this, right? So what happened to the Native Americans that were on this land, right? That's actually, you know what, I'm gonna start in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes. Let's go here. 1 and 9. because we have to understand, as always, as he actually mentioned, and I would recommend y'all watch all 3 of those clips. It's about 30 minutes in total, so I'm not going to play the whole thing. But he even mentioned that history always repeats itself. He said this a few different times, actually. So this is Ecclesiastes 1:9. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun, right? The thing that has been is that which shall be. So just like he was pointing out that the exact same measurements were used in the pyramids in Egypt were being used here in the so-called United States, in North America, actually in Mexico as well, in Central America and South America as well, right? Because they've even found Hebrew artifacts all the way down to Brazil, right? All the way in Brazil. So the thing that has been is that which shall be done. History always repeats itself, right? So everybody that was living in these lands, right? And I'm just going to go through this real briefly because I've gone over this a few times before already. This is what happened to them. The same thing that happened to the Israelites back in the days, right, is what happened to the so-called Native Americans. It says, our inheritance, it's Lamentations 5:2. Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens, right? Our inheritance, the land, is turned to strangers. What are strangers? If you look up that word, it's the other nations of people, right? Our houses to aliens. So what do they call Mexicans, so-called Mexicans, El Salvadorians, Guatemalans, all the people that are the original people of this continent, of the Americas? When they try to come into this land, into the United States, what do they call them? They call them illegal aliens, right? So this is saying our inheritance, our land is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. We are orphans and fatherless. Our mothers are as widows, right? Because the first thing that they would do is kill the men. When they would invade the groups, the tribes of Native Americans or Native Mexicans, whatever you want to call them. So when I say Native Americans, I know people will think of like living in the USA, the United States of America. But when I'm saying Native American, I mean native to the Americas, right? You got North America, Central America, South America, right? So when they would kill the tribes or go and try and move or kill off the tribes, most of the time or a lot of the time, what they would do was kill the fathers. They would kill the men first, and then they would take the children as slaves, right? Try to convert them or use them to do work, and the mothers will become widows, obviously, and they would take them as either sex slaves or force them to take on their customs if they would, right? We have drunken our water for money. Our wood is sold unto us, right? So for example here, and maybe y'all probably can't see it, but this is Crystal Geyser natural alpine spring water, right? Where does this water come from? It comes from a natural spring, right? So when it says we have drunken our water for money, that's literally what is happening to us today, right? If they never came and took over this land and raped, robbed, and murdered our people here, we wouldn't have to pay money for water. We would just go to natural springs and get it like the natives of this land did before, right? Our wood is sold unto us. So back in the days, you think they were paying for lumber? No, right? They were using it, cutting it down, and using it themselves, right? They didn't have to pay nobody to get these things. Okay, so we have to understand that there's no new thing under the sun, And this is going to continue to happen, right? Until, I mean, when you think about it, the so-called Edomites and these other nations have already done this to every land that they've ever gone to, right? So they're going to keep the land until Yahweh Shai, our Messiah, comes back and puts things back in order, right? But so it says our houses is turned to aliens, right? So let me just give you an example real quick. Let's look at the illegal immigrants by nationality, right? By nationality. So this is the profile of the unauthorized population in the United States. Okay, so this tells you all the unauthorized people, all the illegal immigrants, right? The illegal immigrants, it says 10,977,000, so almost 11 million. I think this was a couple years ago. Let me see. Okay, so this is 2018, right? So this was a few years back. But still, the numbers don't differ very much, right? So unauthorized or illegal aliens, top countries of birth, Mexico, right? The so-called Mexicans count for 51% of illegal aliens, right? Over half of the so-called illegal aliens coming into the United States are from Mexico. Okay, over 5.5 million a couple years back, right? And then if you look at the other ones, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, South America, these are all people that have the same, a lot of them have the same indigenous line going back to the Hebrew Israelites, right? So 51% plus 7, that's 58%, plus 5%, that's 63%, plus 4%, that's what, 67%, plus South America, that's already 70%, right? So the vast majority, then the Caribbean, right? Another 4%, because there's a lot of books and references of the conquistadors or the conquestors and conquerors that came over here. They first landed in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and all these islands, right, before they came over here. And they also had similar dialects to the Hebrew as well, right? So we're talking about 75% of the so-called illegals that are coming into the United States. The majority of them actually were here first, right? Going back to this, our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. The real illegal aliens are the ones who are making this list right here and calling all these people the illegals, right? If 51% of the so-called illegals are actually born, they were birthed in Mexico, right? They are the actual, the real owners of this land. You understand what I'm saying? So actually, let's get a couple maps real quick just to put it in perspective for you. So it says over 5.5 million people coming from Mexico into the US, right? Over 5.5 million. Let's look at this is called the territorial evolution of Mexico. Okay, the territorial evolution of Mexico. I'm not going to go through all of it. Y'all can go through it later if you want. But let me just look at a couple maps, right? So let's check out this one. So this, let's see if it'll zoom in. Yeah, it's a really big file, so it might take a second. I'm just going to go back on it. Salakia, y'all bear with me. Okay, here it is. So this is a map of Mexico, okay? 1828. All right, this is less than 200 years ago. This is 190 something years ago. Okay, less than 200 years ago. All this from this line down, that is all Mexico. Okay, all of this from Washington, right? It's almost the center of what's known as the United States. All the way down here, all of Texas, the land I'm on right now. You got New Mexico, Arizona, all the way to California. All of this is Mexico. Okay, all of this, almost half the United States, what's now known as the United States, right? It even says right here, Estados Unidos de Mexico, the United States of Mexico, what they used to call it, right? All this land was Mexico less than 200 years ago, right? So how then is 50%, they're saying 51% of the illegals in this country are coming from Mexico. They're really coming back to their land. You understand what I'm saying? They're really not the illegals of this land. Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. The real illegal aliens are the ones that are calling all the indigenous Mexicans coming into this land aliens, right? And this is what happened to our Israelite ancestors thousands of years ago, right? There's no new thing under the sun. All right, let's check out one more picture real quick, and then I'll get back into a few sources and things of that nature. I always liked this one picture. I'm sure y'all are probably, some of y'all are probably familiar with it. Just click on the first one. So it says North America. Salakia, see if it loads. I'm just going to leave it here like this, right? So North America prior to illegal immigration. Okay, if you look at some of the tribes and things of that nature, it says Aztec Empire, the Cherokee, right? The Blackfoot, right? You got Comanche, Apache, Sioux. You got all these different, the Cree, all these different areas, right? What we now know as states of all the different tribes. And of course, there were smaller tribes within the tribes, right? But the point is, I'm sure y'all get it. Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. Now, some of y'all may be still thinking, okay, well, that maybe you still don't think the Native Americans are Israelites, right? So we'll get into some more information right now. Let's just look at this real quick, right? Let's look at this real quick. So this is the National Congress of American Indians, right? Just like the United States has a Congress, this is the Congress for the so-called American Indian, right? So it says Indian country demographics. According to the 2010 decennial census, 0.9% of the U.S. population, or 2.9 million people, identified as American Indian or Alaska Native alone. So this means less than 1% of the population 11 years ago, right? Less than 1% of the population of this country actually identifies as American Indian or Alaska Native, also indigenous to this land alone. Less than 1%, right? Less than 1%. That's how much they've killed off the Native Americans, so-called Native Americans of this land, right? And that just proves even more that their inheritance, the land, was turned to strangers, to other nations, and their houses, what was their home? They lived in nature, right? To the aliens, to the real illegal aliens, right? So let me get a verse real quick. Psalm. Let's go to Psalm 55, starting on 20. Psalm 55, starting on 20. All right, it says, He hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his covenant. Okay, what did the European, so-called Caucasian, the Edomites that came over here, what did they first do? They made covenants, they made treaties with the Native Americans, right? And then what did they do? After they got them to be at peace with them, to agree to these treaties, they put forth their hands against them, right? They broke their covenants. Check this out real quick. So this says, how many treaties has the U.S. broken with the Native Americans, right? From 1778 to 1871, the United States government entered into more than 500 treaties with the Native American tribes. Over 500 treaties, over 500 agreements, covenants, treaties with the Native American tribes. All of these treaties have since been violated in some way or outright broken by the U.S. government. Native Americans and First Nations peoples are still fighting for their treaty rights in federal courts. And I'm not going to get into that, but you could just look up Native Americans treaty court cases, and there's too many to even mention, right? But look at it this way. From 1778 to 1871, that's not even 100 years, right? That's 97 years, okay, or 90 something years. 500 treaties they broke, right? The U.S. government broke. So going back to this, he hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his covenant. This is exactly what the Edomites did when they came over here. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. Right? The words of his mouth were smoother than butter. They talked real smooth. They said, look, we're going to make these treaties. You're going to keep your land. If you continue watching those videos with Glenn Beck, that the Fox News videos we watched at the beginning, he actually talked about this as well, how they first promised that they were going to keep all their land, right? They told the natives this: we're going to settle in this area and that's it. You're going to keep your land. The words of their mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. But they had war in their mind. They knew what they were going to do, right? They knew they were going to rape, rob, and murder them and take this land. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords, right? So just so you can get an idea how many Native Americans were killed. So if you look at the numbers vary depending on the sources, but it'll go, so here's Wikipedia: genocide of indigenous peoples. Over 80 indigenous tribes disappeared between 1900 and 1957. Okay. So if you read the book or just excerpts of the American Indian Holocaust, right? The American Indian, it says roughly between 80 to 130 million, right? 80 to 130 million. so I don't want to get off topic, but the American Indian Holocaust, known as the 500-Year War, and the world's longest Holocaust in the history of mankind and loss of human lives. Slovakia. How many deaths? What is our number, doctor? Okay, that's just talking about one battle. Counting the dead. So this says today about 70 million indigenous people have been killed, right? But if you look into it, the numbers go up to about 130 million Native Americans, so-called Native Americans that died, right? So let me get into a couple more into some more sources, right? So this is the University of California. This is Robert. This is a bunch of sources that were put together by Robert D. Morin, who's an archaeologist and a historian, right? And all the sources I'll just show you at the bottom. He put this together on the natives of this land, going through a whole bunch of sources. Let me see, where's it at? Okay, right here. Right, so these are all the sources that he's quoting from, all the books, right? All the research from here. I'm just gonna go over a couple excerpts real quick, just to show you and to give further proof, right? That Native Americans, some of the Native Americans were Israelites, right? Let me just make sure. Okay, there's no more comments. So I'm gonna go down. Actually, we're gonna start on Semetic. Where is it? Semetic. I think it was this one. Semetic Amer Indians in Mexico. So Amer or American Indians. Again, American meaning North, Central, South American, right? So Semetic means they stem from the seed of Shem, right? So we know that the Hebrews came from the seed of Shem, right? So you have Shem, Japhet, and Ham, right? So Semitic, the Hebrew people came from a Semitic lineage, right? So this says, when the Spaniards came to Mexico and were standing guard on cold nights, they began to wonder who these Indians really were. Some of those soldiers, Bernal Diaz among them, advanced the idea that these Indians might be Jews. Okay, now this excerpt is actually from a book or a series of books that I have here. Okay, it's called The Conquest of Mexico and New Spain, right? And shout out to the brother Rudy Geronimo. His at on Instagram is Nika the King, Nica the King. He sent me these. They're actually first edition. I'm gonna put them up. Hope maybe you could see them. Let's see. All right, it's the conquest of Mexico and New Spain. Right? They're basically memoirs or diaries from Bernal Diaz, who was one of the conquistadors or one of the conquerors that came to Mexico, or New Spain is what they like to call it, right? So it actually starts by saying this, that they were standing around and some of the soldiers, right, including the man, the conquistador that helped write these memoirs, advanced the idea that these Indians might be Jews, right? Among the Spaniards, the Estemadorans in particular had been raised on Roman history, and they knew about the reigns of the Roman emperors Vespasian and his son Titus. Both Vespasian and Titus had been governors of Judea, and after suppressing the Jewish rebellion around 70 CE, they sent whole tribes of Jews into exile. Right? So they were thinking that it was some of the Jews that got exiled after 70 AD, right? Which we know is incorrect. It was actually the Assyrian. They came over here around the Assyrian captivity, which was hundreds of years before that. But they were just guessing at it, right? The Spaniards wondered if perhaps these Indians were not descended from those ancient Jews who were exiled from Palestine more than 1400 years before, right? So now they're thinking, okay, maybe they were some Jews from even before that, right? So I'm gonna keep reading. It says, well, the Jews knew how to build ships, and it would have been possible to sail across the Mediterranean through the Strait of Gibraltar, then cross the ocean, wouldn't it? So they're asking themselves, hey, the Jews knew how to build ships. It's possible they could have came over here, right? Furthermore, several of the Spaniards came up with an odd fact to support this theory. So even more evidence, right? Several of the Spaniards, they were like, you know what? This also supports it. Indian priests in Zempoala had shown them how the obsidian knives, the sacrificial knives, were also used for circumcision, right? Which was known to be a Jewish rite. Ergo, these Indians might be Jews, right? Dr. Feld traced many of these fleeing Jews to present-day Tennessee. So now think about that for a second. They were following the law of circumcision. If you go into the Torah, you know that the 8th day that the any of the males are supposed to be circumcised, right? Where would they get this tradition or this custom from? Right? So the Spaniards were saying that, hey, that's even more evidence that they are Jews, right? So I'm going to keep reading. Antonio de Montesinos, a Marrano, a secret Jew, while journeying in South America in 1641, had an Indian guide who greeted him with Shema Israel. Hear, O Israel, right? Furthermore, the guide reported that many people of the same origin were living in the highlands near Quito, Ecuador. He also claimed that he met savages who followed Jewish practices. This story Antonio repeated in Holland in 1644 to Manasseh ben Israel, who printed it in his work Hope of Israel in 1650. Okay, so there's a lot in this one paragraph. I'm gonna go over a couple things, but let's just think about this for a second. They were already publishing in the 1600s, 1644, 1650. All right, we're talking about hundreds of years ago, 17, 18, 19, 360, 70, 370 some years ago. They were already saying, hey, we think these natives over here in the Americas are actually Jews. Right? So going back to the brother's comment at the beginning, young Christian, camp doctrine, y'all not Israel, y'all meaning the natives of this land. Y'all not Israel. They made all that up in New York almost over 70 years ago. Y'all still pushing the same nonsense the Mormons believe in. So actually, this is way older than 70 years ago, right? We're talking about the 1600s that people are saying this, and there's even further back references. The late 1400s, Columbus himself, Christopher Columbus himself, came over here to this land in his own diaries, in his own memoirs, and maybe in the next part I'll get it, because I'm definitely gonna do a second part of this. And most high willing, the brother Hawiyala from Church of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, I know he has a lot of information as well. What I'm gonna present right now, this is just this probably ain't even a tenth of the information that's out here, right? But the point is, this was what 300 and something years ago. They were already saying that they're thinking these people, the natives of this land, right, of the Americas, North America, Central America, South America, are actually Jews. They're actually descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? So let me point out a couple things here. So this says Antonio de Montesinos, a Marrano. So if y'all know Spanish, Marrano, let's see what it means, right? Marrano is an offensive word, right? Used as a disparaging term for a converso. Spanish, obviously it's Spanish. It means pig, marrano. Now watch this. From the Jewish prohibition against eating pork, right? Probably from Arabic maram, something forbidden, from harama, to forbid. See XRM in Semetic roots. Again, it's saying this is a Semitic. The roots of this word are Semitic, from Shem, right? In other words, the roots of Hebrew, of Israelites, right? But notice it says, from the Jewish prohibition against eating pork, right? So that's the first thing. Antonio de Montesinos, a Marrano, and they're saying a Marrano is a secret Jew, right? While journeying in South America in 1641, had an Indian guide who greeted him with Shema Israel, right? So he had a native guide in South America, in Ecuador, right? Which is in northwest South America, right? It's in the upper west side of South America. He was speaking in Israel. He greeted this dude who was actually a Jew as well, a secret Jew, they're saying, with Shema Israel, right? I'm gonna go to the blue letter real quick. Go to the blue letter real quick, just to show y'all exactly what he said and that it is Hebrew, right? It's going a little slow, so y'all bear with me. So this is Numbers 9 and 8. And Moses said unto them, stand still, and I will hear what Yahweh will command concerning you. So let's look at the word here. Right? Let's look at the word here real quick. And I will hear. Hebrew 8000, the Hebrew word 8085, right? Shah ma. Salaki, it's getting stuck. Shah ma, right? Shama. Shama. This is the word in Hebrew, right? For hear. Hear. So this native of South America greeted him with Shema Israel, right? Furthermore, the guide reported that many people of the same origin were living in the highlands near Quito, Ecuador. So there was many people with the same origin. He's speaking Hebrew, so what is his origin? Obviously, it's Hebrew, right? The story, he also claimed that he met savages. So of course they called them savages. Like we saw in the videos on Fox News, they wanted them to be known as savages, right? He met savages who followed Jewish practices, right? As we're gonna see in just a minute, they would follow a lot of the Torah, right? This story Antonio repeated in Holland in 1644 to Manasseh ben Israel, who printed it in his works, Hope of Israel, right? So this was printed in 1650. So I have it right here, actually, right? I have it right here. Hope of Israel, Manasseh ben Israel, okay? and he lived from 1604 to 1657. All right, this is the actual a PDF, I guess you would say, copy of his work. Okay, so let's go down to, I think it's page 8. Page 8, and we're gonna start. Let me see. I'll start on this second paragraph, right? But this opinion doth not satisfy, because they anciently were white men, bearded and civil in converse, but contrarily those of Panama, Saint Martha, and the Isles of Cuba and Barlovent went naked. Okay, so I think it starts right here. Furthermore, who can think that the language which he saith they first spoke should be so soon changed that it should be wholly another, and there is no agreement between the one and the other? No, hold on, let me see. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna keep reading. The learned Arius Montans thinks that the Indians of New Spain and Peru are the offspring of Ophir, the son of Joktan, the nephew of Heber, right? So if you look into Hebrew, the word Hebrew, it actually comes from the word Heber, right? Who was an actual figure in the Bible. And he backs his opinion by the name Ophir, which by transposition of letters is the same with Peru. And he adds that the name Parveum and the dual number does signify the isthmus between New Spain and Peru. So basically, he's saying that they think that the Indians of New Spain and Peru are the offsprings of Ophir. Okay, the offsprings of Ophir, right? So if you read, and it even says it here, King Solomon, which I'm not going to read the whole chapter because you'd really have to read the whole chapter, 1 Kings chapter 9 to understand. But King Solomon would send ships to Ophir. Okay, it was called Ophir, and they would come back and bring a whole bunch of gold and precious stones, right? So they were saying that Ophir and Peru were the same place, which if you look into it, there's actually a lot of sources that believe or hold to that train of thought as well, right? There's a lot of sources that actually believe that, right? So when you look at Joktan, right? So they're thinking that the people that live here in the area in Central and South America, they were saying, hey, they may be the offspring of Ophir, the son of Joktan. So now when you really think of this, the letter J, like the brother Jomar says, the letter J wasn't invented till 400 years ago. You should have known that, right? That's a lyric. So this was actually a Y up until a couple hundred years ago, right? Joktan. Joktan. So Yaktan. So if any of you know about Mexico, you've heard of Yucatan, right? So we're gonna go to look this up in the blue letter, Joktan, right? Salakia. Let me see. Joktan, because they were saying, let me go home. They were saying that they believed, right, the Indians of New Spain are the offsprings of Ophir, the son of Joktan, right? The nephew of Heber, in other words, Hebrew. I'm gonna put Joktan. Come on, man. Am I misspelling it? Let me see what verse it was in. Chapter 9. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, right here. So this is Genesis 10 and 25. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his day was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Right? So Genesis 10 and 25. Genesis 10 and 25. So his name was Joktan. Right? These were the sons of Eber. Okay, now let's make a connection real quick. They believe the people in Central and South America were the sons or somehow related to these people. Okay, so if they're related to these people, it's just like in America, right? The people that overtake this land, and then they name all of their they name all the cities and all the places around them, right? They name them after these people. Okay, so keep that in mind. So we're going to look it up in the Hebrew, right? Eber's sons. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. So let's go down to Joktan, right? Now remember, this is the Germanic English translation. So before, let's see how it was spelled. So this is a Y, Q, T, N, Ya, Ka, Ta, Na, Yakatan, right? So now check this out. Yucatan Peninsula, right? Yucatan Peninsula. Anybody that's familiar with Mexico knows about the Yucatan Peninsula or the Yucatan province. Okay, it's a big area in southeastern Mexico. Okay, now where do you think they got this name from? Right, the Yucatan Peninsula. Yucatan Peninsula. Is Yucatan, Mexico safe? Right? Yucatan, Mexico. It's actually a state as well. Right? Check out the pyramids. The pyramids that Glenn Beck was talking about. Right? The pyramids in Yucatan. Then of course you have the Catholic churches there because they were colonized by the Edomites. They came over here, raped, robbed, murdered, and stole their culture, right? Or replaced their culture, should I say. But the point is Yucatan, okay? There's a whole state, there's a whole peninsula, okay, in Mexico that's called the Yucatan. Now we go back to the Hebrew. Now pay attention or keep this in your mind, Yucatan. Remember in Paleo Hebrew, there's no U, right? The most common vowel was an A, okay? So in Hebrew, it would be something more like Yakatan. So we go over here. This is a Y or a Yad. Q, T, N, right? Yakatan. It's the exact same word. It's just transliterated. It's changed, right? And notice this word, Joktan, which is English, but like I said, the J wasn't invented or wasn't around back then. The son of Eber and descendants of Shem, and patriarch of various Arabian tribes. So from Eber, from Shem, there were non-Israelites as well, but the Hebrew Israelites came from the seed of Shem, right? So when they're saying that Yucatan, Yactan, like this man in 1650 said that the people of this area, right, were from the son of they were possibly the offspring of Ophir, the son of Yakatan or Joktan. There's actually a whole lot of evidence that point in that direction, right? Then the other thing is they said that they thought that Ophir was actually Peru, right? And like I said, I suggest y'all look into it later. King Solomon, like it says here, King Solomon brought gold, precious stones, and as in First Kings chapter 9, verse 10 and Second Chronicles 9:21. So if you read both those chapters, First Kings chapter 9, Second Chronicles chapter 9, you'll see that King Solomon was sending ships, and they would take about a year's journey to go and come back, and they would bring back gold, right? So these people were saying that Ophir was actually Peru, which was where they in the word it says, like in Isaiah 13, it says, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, more precious than the gold of Ophir, than the golden wedge of Ophir, because there was much gold in this land. That's why King Solomon would send ships over there, right? So now when you think of Peru or Peru, most people don't think of gold, right? But if we let's just put Peru gold, right? Peru is the 6th largest producer of gold in the world, right? And Madre de Dios, Mother of God, Madre de Dios, is home to one of the largest independent gold mining industries in the world. Mining is the main cause of deforestation in the region, and it also can cause mercury pollution from the gold extraction process. So in Madre de Dios, an area in Peru, it is one of the largest gold mining industries in the whole world, right? So that's even more evidence going back to this, because he was saying that they believe the people that were going over there, the conquistadors that were coming over here, there was so many correlations, right, with the Indians, the natives, that they believed all of this information, right? There was so much correlations that they couldn't ignore it, right? Let me look up one more thing. Peru was called Ophir. So it says Ophir. Ophir is a port or region mentioned in the Bible, famous for its wealth. King Solomon received and then it is going to say that he sent ships over there, right? But you have a lot of different scholars, explorers, things of that nature that believed that Peru was actually Ophir, right? I mean, it's one of the largest gold. It has one of the largest gold deposits, natural gold deposits in the whole world, so it very possibly could be. Explorer says tablets found in Peru may link site to Solomon's gold mines, right? I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I suggest y'all look into it later as well, because there's a lot of information out here, right? I'll just read the first paragraph or two. American explorer says that he has found 3 ancient stone tablets in Peru's highland jungle that may prove the area was the site of King Solomon's legendary gold mines. The explorer Jean Savoy said in an interview the tablets contain the first writings found from the ancient civilizations of the Andes, and that the inscriptions are similar to Phoenician, right, and Semetic hieroglyphs, right? So there's many other sources that will say the same thing. Many people that believe that Ophir could be in Peru, right? Explorer says Peruvian tablets may be linked to King Solomon. And of course there's other information that say, you know what, maybe it's not, but there's a lot of information out there saying it is, right? King Solomon's gold came from Peru, right? Tracing King Solomon's gold to the land of the ancient Incas. Okay, there's a lot of information out there that actually go along with that train of thought, right? So let me see. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and sit on that for now, right? Let's go back to this other information, right? So that was Manasseh ben Israel, right? That's what he had published. He had printed that work. It was called Hope of Israel. If y'all want to look into it, it's this information here, right? Hope of Israel, published in 1650. Okay, I'm gonna actually exit out of that. I'm gonna keep reading on. Early in the 19th century, a young member of parliament, Edward King, Viscount Kingsborough, was struck by the beauty and mystery of a Mexican Indian codex or manuscript. Okay, so there was this dude, Edward King, right? He was a member of the parliament. He came across a manuscript, right? A Mexican Indian manuscript in the Bodleian Library that arrived at Oxford, right? So they somehow ended up, most likely they stole it from some of the so-called Mexican Indians, and it ended up in Oxford, okay, which is a university that is very well known for elite. A lot of the elites go there, right? The one percenters, those that are part of the Skull and Bones and all those types of satanic organizations, right? He exhausted his fortune and perhaps his life in attempting to prove that the lost tribes of Israel were ancestors of the Indians of Mexico. Nearly half of Adair's book was reprinted by the passionately convinced Kingsborough. Okay, so it's telling you this man who was a member of parliament, well off, probably wealthy, came across this Mexican Indian codex or manuscript, and because of it, right, and because of the books that he was reading, he spent all his fortune and most of his life attempting to prove that the lost tribes of Israel were ancestors of the Indians of Mexico, right? The Indians of Mexico. Okay, I'm gonna jump down. Let me make sure there's no comments. So Sergio Silva, Shalom, Yahweh Shem Yahushai Barakatah, Danya Allah, or is that oh no, I believe that's Azariah, right? Yahweh Shem Yahushai Barakatah, Poor Jerusalem, Shalom, Danya Allah, Yahweh Shem Yahushai Barakatah. Of course, they're calling it Mother of God, right? Of course, they're gonna go off like that into idolatry, right? So I'm gonna go back to this real quick. So it says, Dia Amaxtlil, the divine book, as it was called, according to Ixtil Xochitl, it was composed by a Texcucan doctor named Huematzin towards the close of the 7th century. It gave an account of the migrations of his nation from Asia, of the various stations on their journey, and of their social and religious institutions, their science, arts, etc. Right? So they had this book. They would call it the divine book. Right? Now let's see what was in a few of the things that were in it. It has never been seen by a European. A copy is said to have been in possession of the Texcucan chroniclers, right? So they wanted to keep it amongst themselves. They didn't want the Europeans, the colonizers, to get a hold of it, right? But in the end, of course, they ended up on the taking of their capital, right? So when they came in 1822, they were trying to keep it away from them, right? Lord Kingsborough, who can scent out a Hebrew root, So he was thinking it had Hebrew origins, Hebrew roots, right? Has discovered that the Teomoxtli was the Pentateuch. Thus, Theo means divine, Amato means paper or book, and Moxtli appears to be Moses. So it literally translated to divine book of Moses, right? Divine book of Moses. Antiquities of Mexico, volume 6, which that's another a book that I've been trying to get my hands on, but man, they get really expensive, obviously, because they don't want the information to get out there, right? This appears to be associated more with the Aztecs than with the Mayans. The Nahuatl, Uto-Aztecan language itself has been shown to have many Hebraic Semetic roots and can be traced to northwest Palestine, right? Which we know Palestine is just a part of Israel. They just divided it, call it different names, right? Where parts of the Israelites, tribes of Dan, Naphtali, Zebulun, Asher, and Issachar settled, right? So they're saying that the Aztecs, right, and the Aztec language, right, has a lot of Hebrew and Shemitic roots in it. Okay, they can trace this. They can trace this the divine book of Moses that they had, right? They can trace it back to parts where the Israelites lived, where the tribes of Dan, Naphtali, Zebulun, Asher, and Issachar settled, right? In other words, these are the northern kingdom, right? So they're literally saying, and notice that this is information that is coming from the 1800s, right? 16 to 1800s. So like the brother that left the comment saying, oh, this was invented in New York by the camps, this is camp doctrine and all this stuff. This is actually hundreds and hundreds of years old, right? This is actually based on a lot of facts. And you could say what you want about the chart, right? But it's literally saying they can trace this back. They can trace back some of the Aztec language itself back to where the Issacharites settled, right? Back to where the Issacharites settled, which that's a beautiful thing to me, because I mean, going off of the chart, I would be either Gad or Issachar, right? So just seeing that the Aztecs, which I mean, ruled the land where, as far as I know, my ancestors came from. That's a beautiful thing to find out, right? So let's jump down. Actually, there's one said I think it's Hebrews in America. There's a lot of good information on this page. If y'all want to check it out later, I'm not gonna go through all of it because it would take hours and hours. But I'm just gonna go through a couple of the things that I saw that were interesting, right? So I'm gonna start right here. Hebrews in the Americas. The Uchis have a custom that is unique among the American Indians. They are racially and linguistically different from their neighbors. Every year on the 15th day of the sacred month of harvest in the fall, they make a pilgrimage. For 8 days, they live in booths with roofs open to the sky, covered with branches and leaves of foliage. During this festival, they dance around the sacred fire and called upon the name of God. Right? So if you're familiar with the holy days, you already know what this is, right? The ancient Israelites had the virtually identical custom in many respects. So we're talking about some of the natives, okay? The Yuchi tribe, right? The ancient Israelites had the virtually identical custom in many respects. In the harvest season, in the fall, on the 15th day of the sacred month of harvest, the 7th month, they celebrate the festival of booths, Feast of Tabernacles, Leviticus 23, right? For 8 days. During this time, they lived in temporary booths covered with branches, leaves, fronds, This festival goes back to the time of Moses and the Exodus from ancient Egypt, Leviticus 23. It is intriguingly fascinating that two totally separated peoples could observe the same custom. The reason why they're observing the exact same custom is because they are not totally separated people, right? How could they observe the same custom if they weren't the same people, right? They are the same people. They were literally uh, um, observing the Feast of Tabernacles at the exact same time that it says to in the Bible, right? For the same period of time. How could the Native Americans even have this information, right? If they weren't the same people? That would be my question to somebody who thinks that it could just be a coincidence, right? So actually let me pull up what is it called? The Secret. What's the dude's name? Secret Joseph Dr. Joseph, I think it's Mahan. Okay, come. So this is Dr. Joseph Mahan, right? He's written a lot of books. You know what? I'm just gonna go back and go to, maybe I can see it in, okay, here on Amazon. This is another good book that has a lot of information, which I won't get too into it, but it's called The Secret: America in World History Before Columbus. All right. I really want to get this as well, but as you can see, $140 ain't gonna happen anytime soon. Maybe we could get a PDF or something like that, right? But he goes into the Native Americans' history, and he makes a lot of the same conclusions, and he finds and documents a lot of the information showing how the natives were keeping a whole lot of the same traditions and laws and ceremonies of the Israelites, right? So if y'all want to look into that later, it's Dr. Joseph Mahan, The Secret, right? I'm gonna keep going. Dr. Cyrus Gordon of Brandeis University in Boston indicated that he was privileged to sit in on one of the fall harvest festivals of the Yuchi or Yuki Indians and listened to their chants, songs, and sacred ceremonies. An expert in Hebrew. So this dude, Dr. Cyrus Gordon, he was one of his majors was in different languages, right? And not just different languages, but in archaic old languages, right? So he actually got to sit in on one of the festivals, okay, on one of the feast days with the Native Americans, with the Yuki or Yuchi Indians, right? It says he was an expert in Hebrew, Minoan, and many Middle Eastern languages. He was incredulous. As he listened, he exclaimed to his companion, "They are speaking the Hebrew names for God." Right? They are speaking the Hebrew names for God. So if you look into this man as well, he has some good information out there, and he has a lot of I don't know if they're books, but letters and pages and pages of documents and history and things of that nature on the Native Americans as well. But that's crazy that he actually got to sit at one of the feast days, right, with the Native Americans, and he was an expert. He majored in like I said, older um languages, one of them being Hebrew, right? And it says he exclaimed to his companion, "They are speaking the Hebrew names for God, Yahweh," right? They were calling on the Most High's name in Hebrew, which is a beautiful thing, right? So let me go down a little bit. So he also talks about King Solomon's navy, right? But I think the next one talks about Paleo. Okay, so right here, Paleo Hebrew inscription discoveries. There are a surprising number of instances that appear to corroborate the fact that Israelites had visited the American continents for thousands of years. Other inscriptions, also written in Paleo Hebrew, have been discovered in the states of Iowa, Ohio, and Tennessee, as well as in Brazil, right? And also New Mexico, also in Mexico, right? In Newark, Ohio, a carved stone of interesting workmanship was discovered, which also bears an engraved inscription of the Ten Commandments of the Covenant, written in Paleo Hebrew. So that's the one that was in the video, one of the artifacts that was in the video that we watched at the beginning, right? That they found in Ohio. At a site known as Bat Creek Cave, Tennessee, an ancient Hebrew inscription was found that mentions the Israelite tribe of Judah, right? Another fascinating archaeological discovery in America is an ancient artifact bearing an old Hebrew inscription of the Ten Commandments unearthed in Ohio in 1860. The tablet also includes a scene of an individual, Moses, carved into the front of the tablet in considerable detail, holding the tablet of the Ten Commandments. This artifact was discovered in an ancient burial ground, right? So those are some of the ones that we actually saw at the beginning, right? The Newark Holy Stones, which I'll pull up a picture of it real quick. Newark Holy Stones. Just gonna pull up a picture because we saw it in the video already, right? So here you have the one of Moses, right? And above his head, I believe it says Moses or Masha, and then it has a abbreviated version of the commandments around it, right? Let me get a closer picture of it, just so y'all can see. I'm sure a lot of you brothers are familiar with this, but just for those of you who aren't, Newark Holy Stones, right? Check that out, right? So it is the newer block Hebrew, right? It's not the Paleo Hebrew. So this was actually sealed inside of this like a mini coffin, and they said it was cemented around the edges, right? And then you had the bowl and the rock, which is similar to like my grandma before she passed away, and all of I have a tia that lives in Matamoros in Mexico. They all have the stone bowl and the stone to break up different herbs and make different dishes, right? So let me show you a couple more, just for those of you who aren't familiar with it. Also, the New Mexico Decalogue stone, right? New Mexico Decalogue stone. I believe they're gonna mention it in a minute, but just in case they don't, let me pull that up real quick. So this Decalogue stone, it's a huge stone. Actually, I do believe they mention it. This is a huge stone, right? That has the Paleo Hebrew on it. It has the Ten Commandments in Paleo Hebrew, okay, on the stone. And if any of you are familiar with the Paleo Hebrew, let me see if I have my, okay, yeah, I have this here. Most High willing, y'all can see this. Let me try and put it up on the screen. This is the Paleo Hebrew alphabet, right? This is something my rib did for me. all the different letters on there. For any of you that are familiar with it, right, you can see here, I can't zoom in anymore, but this is the Ya or the Y. This is the Ha or the H. This is the Wa or the W, which looks like a Y. And this is another H or Ha. So it says Ya, Ha, Wa, Ha. It says Yahweh right there, right? I believe it's somewhere else on the stone as well. Okay, right here. Same thing. Ya, Y, Ha, H, Wa, W, and then Ha, another H. Ya, Ha, Wa. Yahweh, right? It's written multiple times on here. Okay, because it's in the 10 Commandments, right? You will have no other, I am Yahweh, you'll have no other gods before me. You shall not take Yahweh's name in vain, right? So now this stone is in New Mexico, okay? It is the largest and oldest Paleo-Hebrew 10 Commandments that has ever been found, on this side of the world at least, right? It's in Los Lunas, New Mexico, which is, I believe it's about 30 miles or 30 minutes away from Albuquerque. That's the nearest big city around there, right? So there's many artifacts in the Americas with the Paleo Hebrew, right? Just proving once again that, hey, we know that the Israelites are over here, right? So let me see. Yeah, I believe I finished that, right? Inscriptions. Yeah, I finished that. So let's go back down. Let me see. Or actually, I'm going to read this. Native language and customs, right? There are many Native American Indian customs that confirm the fact of their Hebrew origin. Many of those customs and linguistic evidence were observed and recorded by the first Europeans who had contact with the various Indian tribes, right? So when the people, the first Europeans, the first Edomites, the first Spaniards that came over here, just like in this book that I had showed y'all, Conquest of Mexico and Spain, okay? This was actually written by one of the conquistadors that came over here, Bernal Diaz, right? I still haven't finished it because it's 2 volumes. I'm probably about halfway done with one of them. So for the part 2, I'm gonna try and screenshot a lot of the information from here. But there's many different people and there's many different instances and many different things, right? Customs and, like it says, linguistics, meaning the way they spoke, that made them think, hey, these have to be Jewish people, so-called Jewish, right? They have to be somehow related to the Jews because of all the customs that they have that line up perfectly, right? Like we saw how they were keeping the Feast of Tabernacles. How are they going to know how to keep the Feast of Tabernacles if they're not Israelites? Why would they keep the Feast of Tabernacles if they're not Hebrew Israelites, right? That wouldn't make no sense. So it says the old customs of the American Indian people included many rituals that were the same or partially differed. So a lot of the rituals were the same or a little bit different, right? And as we know, just like we saw Ecclesiastes 1:9, history always repeats itself. And the reason we always end up in captivity as Israel is because we go away from what the Most High set up, right? So eventually we know the Native American tribes started going off, started worshiping totem poles and the creations more than the creator, right? But hundreds of years ago, 1600s, right? 1400s even, they were still keeping the customs when the Europeans were first coming over here, right? So it says the old customs of the American Indian people included many rituals that were the same or partially differed from the equivalent Hebrew observances of the Mosaic law. So they were keeping the equivalent of the Hebrew observances of the Mosaic law. They were still keeping, some of them were still keeping the laws of Moses, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, right? Each Indian tribe displayed some customs or traditions that are definitely Hebrew in character, right? Each Indian tribe displayed some customs, at least some customs, at least some traditions that are definitely Hebrew in character, right? So examples, the Passover was observed at the time of the full moon. Indian legends, including that of the Yukis, stated that they had migrated to the area of Florida and Georgia from the region of the Bahamas, right? So they originally landed in the Bahama area, and then they came to the Gulf of Mexico, what is known now, right? Florida, Georgia, that area, right? So what's interesting though is the Passover was observed at the time of the full moon, right? So I don't know how many of y'all have kept the Passover yet, right? I believe this year was our 4th year, I want to say. I believe it was our 4th year keeping the Passover in my household, right? And you know that the Passover is the 14th day, or at even of the 14th, which is the 15th day, right? Which means if you're going by the moon is the beginning of the month, it's that first light. I know a lot of people go off of the dark moon being the beginning of the month, but according to my understanding and a lot of the brothers that I associate myself with, that first light is the beginning of the month, right? So if you go from the first light and you go 14, 15 days, which is when the Passover is observed, right? It would be at the time of the full moon, which is interesting that they still had that understanding, the Native Americans, and they were still observing the Passover, right? So it says, let me jump down here. Every year on the 15th day of the sacred month of harvest in autumn, they make a pilgrimage. For 8 days, they live in booths with the roof open. So again, it's saying about how they would keep the Feast of Tabernacles, right? The Feast of Tabernacles. In the harvest season of autumn, on the 15th day of the sacred month of harvest, 7th month, they celebrated the festival of booths. This festival dates to the time of Moses and the Exodus from Egypt, which is in Leviticus 23, right? And Leviticus 23 has it right here, right? And also, it's crazy because, I mean, how would they know about this if they didn't have the Bible? That would be my question to people that say, "Nah, well, it's just a coincidence," or Native Americans are not Hebrew Israelites. My first question would be, who are they then? Who are the Native Americans? Because we all come from a biblical nation. But my next question will be, how did they learn how to keep the Passover? How did they learn how to keep the Feast of Tabernacles if they weren't Israelites, right? So then again, it's gonna say Dr. Cyrus Gordon, how he got to observe or go to one of the festivals, right? And he said, "My God, they are speaking the Hebrew names of God," right? So then it says, some of the best educated Europeans who first contacted American Indians in Eastern North America noticed that in the language of many tribes, there were numerous words that sounded the same and had the same meaning as Hebrew words, right? And I'll give you all an example. Real quick. My son's name, so on my rib side of the family, on her dad's side, her dad is Guatemateca. He's Guatemateca, and he's straight up from Guatemala. Came over here when he was, I believe, 17. Started working hard, built hundreds and hundreds of houses, right? But on her mom's side, they have Cherokee. Okay, so her grandma, before she passed away, she was real big on that, on the whole like Cherokee and all of that, right? So my son's name is Noah Waya Bea, right? Which is my last name. And Waya, the reason we took that last name, I'll just let you see it, is because my ribs grandma told us what Waya meant, right? So I would click on it, but it's probably gonna slow down my stream. It says Cherokee word of the week is wolf, right? The word for wolf. Let me see if I can see a Cherokee Nation. Waya. The word for wolf is Waya. Ani just means clan, right? So this is saying Waya or Ani Waya. It's saying clan wolf. So there's two interesting things to look at here. The Cherokee, right? Waya. So first of all, Yah, we already know is short for Yahweh, right? It's short for Yahweh. Wa in Hebrew actually means and, right? And then Ani, like I said, Ani just means clan, right? Let me see. So how it says here, wolf clan, right? Wolf clan. So if it says Ani Wa, it means wolf clan. But another thing to look at here is that's cool. Hebrew is right to left. In English, of course, we read left to right. So you would say this as Ani Waya, right? But Cherokee, so Ani means clan, Waya means wolf. So you would be saying clan wolf. That's incorrect, right? It's wolf clan. So you would actually have to read it right to left in order for it to make sense. Waya, wolf, clan, Ani. So the Cherokee, their language was almost backwards, just like the Hebrew, right? But like my son, the point I was making is my son, his middle name is Waya, which literally in Hebrew it means and Yah or and Yahweh, right? So my son's name is Noah, which we know Noah is a biblical name, with or and Yahweh, right? And this is before we even got into we were barely coming into the truth when my rib got pregnant with my son. She's 4 and a few months, right? So it was about 5 years ago. So through the spirit, we gave him a Hebrew name without even knowing it, thinking that it was a Cherokee name because of my rib's grandma, who was Cherokee, right? Who even has family that lives on the reservations in Oklahoma, or they used to, right? They used to. But going back to this, so it says there were numerous words that sounded the same and had the same meaning as Hebrew words, right? Among those reaching this conclusion were notable early immigrants to North America, such as William Penn, Robert Williams, and Jonathan Edwards, right? So there's a lot of other publishing by these men. If you want to look into it, again, there's so much information out there that, like I was said at the beginning, I could do 3, 4, 5 parts of this, and there would be a couple hours long each, and we still wouldn't even get through even half of the information. You know what I'm saying? But if you want to look into it, William Penn, Robert Williams, Jonathan Edwards, right? Some of the people that wrote about it, right? This is one of them. Roger Williams wrote this. It's called A Key into the Language of America, right? A help to the language of the natives in that part of America called New England, right? So he even made some references as well to the same thing, right? It says they have the exact form of king, priest, and prophet as was in Israel, typical of old in the Holy Land of Canaan, and as the Lord Jesus ordained in his spiritual land of Canaan, his church throughout it, the whole world, right? So then it goes on to say that they govern themselves right? They are wise men and old men, right? Which were like the priests that the ancient Israelites had, right? They even had a Tapawag, right? Which is like a solemn speech or orations or lectures, right? Concerning religion, peace, war, and all things. They had certain elders, certain wise men, right? Certain prophets, certain priests, chiefs, even, right? Set up the same way as the Israelites did way back in the days. And this man and many other people that came to the Americas were making this connection, right? They were all making these connections and thinking, man, well, this really makes sense that all of these people are have certain parts of their speech that are Hebrew. They have certain customs that are Hebrew. Where did all of these things come from? So they were putting two and two together, right? If it barks, it's a dog. If it meows, it's a cat. Basically, is what they were saying, right? That's basically what they were saying. And I mean, I could just keep going and keep going, but this will probably be the last one I go over on this page, and then I'll go over a couple more things, and then I'll probably end it. So it says Hebrew language, North and South American similarities. Words that have the same sounds and meanings in Hebrew as they do in the American Indian languages include those for wife, man, heavens, prayer, winter, and many verbs and phrases, right? So one of the first ones that we noticed, well, my rib and me had noticed when we started studying the Hebrew is like ama, right? Ama. In Spanish, you would call your mom ma, right? Or so-called Hispanics, Latinos, or even ama, right? That's the same word in Hebrew, right? There's a lot of them that are similar like that. So it says among the words that were nearly identical to the Hebrew were Yohiwa, corresponding to Yahweh, which we know in the Paleo Hebrew, like we saw on the Decalogue stone. In Paleo Hebrew, there were no consonants. There wasn't as many vowels. Salakia, that's what I meant to say. There wasn't as many vowels. There was no E. A was the most common vowel, right? So we know that it's impossible to be Yahweh. It was actually, like we saw, Yah, Ha, Wa, Ha. The tetragrammaton is only the word in Hebrew for the Most High's name is only 4 letters, right? It was YHWH. So here in the Americas, though, they were calling on the name Yohiwa, Yahweh, Yohiwa, basically the same sound, right? And Hallelujah or Hallelujah, right? So they were still saying Hail Yahweh, right? Similarities in the mid-1600s, reports of Hebrew-speaking Indians in South America first came to the attention of Europeans. As in North America, not only did the Europeans discover many strong similarities between the spoken languages of the Indians and the Hebrew language, they also reported seeing inscriptions written in Hebrew and a very strong similarity between Indian customs and Israelite practices. Right? So the same thing they were seeing in North America, they were seeing in South America, right? They were seeing these same similarities. They were seeing the same Hebrew, right? The same customs, the same Israelite practices, and all of these things, right? So let me see if there's anything else I want to go over. I'll check the comments right now too. Oh yeah, some of the burial sites, which they went over, that the videos that we watched from Fox News, from Glenn Beck, They went over that as well, right? So another thing was the tombs, right? They even had similar tombs, right? Like how Yahushua was in the tomb and they had to roll the big old stone in front of it. They even had similar tombs to how the Israelites had back in the days, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and sit on that for a minute. What else did I want to get though? I mean, might as well look at which is a very obvious one, which I'm sure y'all are familiar with, but just for the people that are more new to the truth or may come across this video, right? This is Numbers 15:38. Speak unto the children of Israel and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generation, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue. Right? So now remember, these archaeologists, these historians, these Europeans, these conquistadors, the conquerors that came over here, the murderers that came over here, they were noticing that they were following a lot of the Mosaic laws, right? This is in Numbers. This is part of the Mosaic law. One of the laws to the children of Israel was, of course, to put fringes, right? Put fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, meaning you're going to have it, you're going to have it, you're going to have it, right? So I'm sure everybody is familiar with Native Americans having fringes, right? Let's just see if we can find a couple pictures real quick. So you got a Native American woman here, the long fringes, right? Got a hieroglyph that's an Egyptian, but they colored it obviously. You got depictions. I believe I posted this picture not too long ago, right? It says 7 God's people wear fringes with a ribbon of blue around it. So you see the Native Americans are drawing water. They got the ribbon of blue. Hopefully y'all can see that. And they got the long fringes, right? Here as well, got the fringes, got the blue, right? No matter what pictures you look of the older Indians before they were colonized, right? You're gonna see that they had the fringes on, right? Even so-called Mexicans, right? Even the so-called Mexicans, which again are Native American as well, have fringes. I know my grandma, when I was first coming into the truth and I first had fringes, and I remember I went over, this is on my dad's side, and she was like, "Oh, those are nice. I have a dress like that." She brought out a dress and it was actually fringed. She didn't even know what it was for or the purpose, the meaning of it. But it just goes to show you, it's in our people's spirit because it's our tradition, right? Okay, it's not gonna load that. Let me go back. I know there was a brother that had posted, it's this picture right here. I don't know if y'all can see it when it's that small. So it's real small right here. Let me see if I can zoom in. Nah, it's not gonna let me, even if I do. You can see the fringes here on the bottom. They got the fringes here on the sash. They even got fringes on the bottom of their pants, right? And you can see here they got that. It's probably a coincidence that he didn't do this purposely, but it's got the border of blue, border of blue. Even on this one, you can see a slight border of blue, right? So that just goes to show that even through the spirit, I mean, our people may not know what the fringes are for, but they still know, but they don't know. They still have and carry on the traditions, even unknowingly, right? So another big thing Actually, let me check the comments real quick. CJ Bahar, are you a so-called Mexican? So I can never really answer that question because my dad's seed line, we can go back. My dad, my grandpa, great grandpa are from the northern Mexico area, right? But what you have to understand is, like we just saw the map, 150, 160 years ago. Actually, let me pull up the where's it at? Okay, 160, 170 years ago, we looked at the map, and Mexico was the whole, almost half the United States. You know what I mean? If we look at a map from even 100 years back, it was even more of the United States was so-called Mexico, right? So it's hard to say if what you consider a Mexican, what you consider a Native American, because if it was, we're talking 160 years ago, a lot of the what we now call Native Americans were actually Mexicans, because this land that we're on right now is Mexico, right? So the society in general would probably call me a Mexican, but we know that it's more a Native American, native to the Americas is the term I would go by. But obviously Hebrew Israelite, all of that means nothing compared to being Israel, right? Excellent sources and books. Tawada, what's the site that you're on now, Ak? It's the University of California. I believe that was the one that I was on a minute ago. Let me see. It's the University of California. I don't know if it was at San Bernardino or, hold on. Why is it not showing? I'll send it to you. What is it? Port of Jerusalem. Message me after this if you want, or you know what? I'll post it up on my story. I'll post it up on my story. Name of the book you just mentioned recently. Okay, Tawada the brother posted up The Secret America and History Before Columbus. What's that page called? I can't see it. It's not clear. So I'll post it on my story when I'm done with this. I'll post it on my story. Most importantly, you an Israelite. That's all that really matters, right? And as a matter of fact, I'm glad you said that, because when I was first coming into the truth, right, my rib was actually the one that she came, the way she found out about it, and like I said, it was about 5 years ago. She came across the stronghold of Israel. I'm sure some of y'all, at least a few of y'all, are familiar with that page on Instagram. I'm not sure if it's still up, but at that time it was a stronghold of Israel. They had posted up the 12 tribe chart, right? So it said, if you're on this sign, you're actually a Hebrew Israelite, or you have Hebrew roots, I think is what it said, right? So I was like, what? I've never heard of this before. You know what I mean? At first you're skeptical of things you don't know, stuff like that, right? So one of the first things I did was I Googled Mexican or Mexico Hebrew roots. It's right here. I was looking it up earlier, actually. So if you watch this video, it says Mexico has discovered its Hebrew roots. This is from 5 years ago, right? It was a brand new video when I was coming into the truth. It had like just been posted. And I watched this man, I forgot what his name is, right? But he was born in Mexico. And his village, his tribe, whatever you want to call it, they were shepherds, right? And they worked the land, they worked agriculture. This is actually his mom, I believe, in that picture. I want to, when I go over it, it changes. But is this man right here, right? And of course, he's talking to the Christian Edomite dude about his Hebrew roots. But the picture right there, that's his mom. So he was asking him, like, well, what kind of similarities or what was some of the things that you noticed, you know, when before or when you found out you had Hebrew roots, right, being a Mexican. And he said, well, the first thing was my mom and all the females in the village, they keep their head covered, right? They wear dresses, they wear skirts. We do agriculture similar to David and the forefathers, right? Where he was a shepherd. I believe he taught his sons how to be shepherds as well. Um, oh, another thing, they grew fig trees, which we know there's parables with the fig trees and stuff all throughout the word. And they grew pomegranates, right? Which we know the what people try to say is the Star of David, and they try and say it's a pomegranate. A pomegranate is a pomegranate, and that the 666 star is something totally different, right? But they grew pomegranates and figs, and he said that it was cool that it really correlated, and it like bared witness with his spirit, his Hebrew roots, right? So this isn't really a new thing, and this is a man that coming as a Christian, you know what I'm saying? But it's cool because it was one of the things that I first saw coming into the truth, and it wasn't even like a camp type of doctrine. You know what I'm saying? It was more of a came off to me as like a Christian type of thing or type of belief. You know what I'm saying? But just to go back to what the brother said, you know, most importantly, you're an Israelite, and he says the same thing actually. That I think the Edomite dude tells him something um, like, do you see yourself as a Mexican or something like that? And he said, well, I don't even see myself as that no more. I'm Israel. You know what I mean? Which is really, it's a beautiful thing, right? So Khan, the ox said you watched that before. That's cool. That's cool. The Most High leads us to certain things through the Spirit. You know what I'm saying? And that's probably a video you could share with so-called Mexicans when they're first coming into the truth as well. You're first trying to teach them like, hey, look, you're actually Israel, because some people are going to be, let's be honest, some people are going to be pushed away by the whole camp, some of the camps, the way that the camps teach. You know what I'm saying? Some people are turned off by the way that they teach. You know what I'm saying? So actually there was one more thing. Let me see if it'll come up. What was it? Hope of Israel. Let me go back to this book real quick. Right here. Wanted to point out one more thing. It was on page 10. Okay. So this was the book, The Hope of Israel, right? So this book was written in 1650. All right, again, just to point out, because like the first brother at the beginning at 3 something p.m. before I even started doing the live, he was saying this is a camp doctrine. This was made 70 years ago in New York and whatever, right? This is 1650, man. This is almost, man, how many, more than 300 years ago, right? That people were already getting a wind of this. The Most High was already making this, putting this on people's spirit, right? So this, I'm just going to read from section 3. It says, the first ground of that opinion is taken. So the opinion was that the so-called Native Americans were Jews, right? The first ground of that opinion is taken from 2nd Ezra's chapter 13, verse 40, which we quote as ancient, though it be apocryphal. So they're saying we're quoting it, it's ancient, right? Even though it's apocryphal. So we know that apocrypha, loosely translated, means like hidden knowledge or hidden wisdom or hidden book of wisdom, right? It was hidden. So they're saying even though it was hidden, we still quote it because it's ancient, right? So in 2nd Ezra 13 and 40, where it said that the 10 tribes which Solomon Astar carried away or carried captive in the reign of Hosea beyond the Euphrates, determined to go into countries far remote in which none dwelt, whereby they might the better observe their law. Right? So I'll actually get that. And let me jump down here real quick, right? It says the 10 tribes went to New Spain, which New Spain is what they call Mexico, right? Because Spain came and conquered it, and that's why, like I showed you in this book, it says the conquest of Mexico and New Spain. Anything that the Spaniards claimed over here on this side in the Americas, they were just calling it New Spain, right? So they were saying the 10 tribes went to New Spain and Peru and possessed those two kingdoms till then without inhabitants, right? So where did they get this information from? Where did they get this train of thought, though? They got it from the Apocrypha, 2nd Ezra 13 and 40, right? 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. So I'm going to read it real quick. 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanasar, the king of Assyria, led away captive. And he carried them over by the waters, and so came they into another land. Right? So this is when they were taken captives in the Assyrian captivity. You look up the captivities, you'll know the Assyrian captivity, right? It says, but they took this counsel amongst themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen. Were amongst these Assyrians and all these heathens. They came together, they counseled with one another. They said, we're going to go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So they came over to the Americas where no one was living, right? There's some so-called black Hebrew Israelite or Negro only Israelites that they believe if you're not a certain shade or darker, you're not Israel, right? They'll say that this land, the Americas, is not where they came, right? But then you have to tell me who were the people, like who dwelt here before the Native Americans, right? Because it says where never mankind dwelt. Then some of them will say, well, they went into Africa. They went further south into Africa. But Africa is where all the civilization came from, right? It says in the word, it says Jerusalem was the mother of all. But there was already people all dwelling all throughout Africa, right? That's why you have certain tribes. You got thousands of tribes there that have thousands and thousands of years of history because they've been dwelling there, right? You're not going to go into Africa where mankind was already dwelling, right? So it said they wanted to leave the multitude of the heathen to go to a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land, right? So when they came over here, what were the archaeologists and the historians and the Europeans that were coming over here, what were they saying? And then, like I said, there's tens and tens and tens of diaries and firsthand accounts of all these Europeans, which have no need to lie. Why would they lie about it in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s, saying that all these tribes were keeping the Feast of Tabernacles, that these tribes were keeping the law of Moses, that these tribes were keeping the Passover, that these tribes were speaking in Hebrew, right? They came over here and they were keeping their statutes for an extended period of time, right? And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river. If you see the Euphrates, how it goes down, and then around Africa would be how to come over here, right? For the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. So the Most High showed them signs and he held the waters, because think about it, back then, thousands of years ago, that would be a dangerous trip, right? There's ships nowadays that some of them don't even make it that far, right? So back then, with no technology, that was a dangerous trip. But the Most High made it for them to come over here. He made it safe enough, right? For through that country, there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. The same region is called Arsarith, right? The same region is called Arsarith. So Arsarith is where they were said to have come. So let's look up Arsarith or Arzarith in the Jewish Encyclopedia, right? So this is the Jewish Encyclopedia. The name of the land beyond the great river, far away from the habitation of men, in which the 10 tribes of Israel will dwell, observing the laws of Moses. We just read, all the Europeans were saying, hey, they were keeping the laws of Moses. Some of them were keeping these, some of them were keeping these partial laws, but they were still doing it, right? So according to Ezra's, Columbus identified America with this land, right? So if you actually read Christopher Columbus's diaries, I didn't actually get that prepared. Maybe on the next lesson I'll pull it up, but he would keep diaries, right? It says C. Kaiserling's Christopher Columbus, translated by Dr. C. Gross. In his diaries, he literally said he was coming to this side of the world because he believed it was Arsarith, and he believed that there were Jews, and he wanted more slaves. It was a good business venture, basically, to come over here and to find more slaves, right? Find more slaves. So I'm gonna probably finish. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28 real quick. I'm gonna finish with Deuteronomy 28. And one more article. Smithsonian. So I'm pretty sure some of y'all are familiar with this as well, right? Smithsonian Magazine. The Smithsonian Magazine, which is a very reputable historical means of content, I guess you would say, right? It says researchers identify Mexican wreck as 19th century Maya slave ship. Okay, so they identified a Mexican wreck, right, in the Gulf of Mexico, and they finally identified it after I forgot how many years. I'll read it in a second. They identified it as a Maya slave ship. Spanish traders, so the Spaniards that came over here to conquer this land, Spanish traders used the steamboat to transport enslaved indigenous individuals to Cuba, right? Because like it says in this book, one more time, the conquest of Mexico and Spain, they landed in Cuba and Puerto Rico first, obviously, because it's before you get to the Americas, right? So just like in this book, they would have stations in Cuba and in Puerto Rico, right? Because it was nicer, it was more a tropical environment, and they had already landed there previously, so they had little communities, little towns or cities per se set up, right? So since they already had little civilizations of Europeans there, when they would come to the Americas, North America, Central America, South America, right? These Spaniards, these Edomites, they would they would enslave the indigenous people and take them back to Cuba and then take them back to Spain, right? So it's crazy to me, and maybe I'm sure some of y'all will think the same thing. It's crazy to me that so-called African Americans, so-called so-called African Americans, Israelites, right? Especially like say the Negro only Israelites, which I've dealt with a lot of them or talked to a lot of them in the past, and I'll ask them, so how do you know that you're Israel, right? Well, I'm a so-called African American, so I'm Israel. Well, not just any so-called African American is Israel, right? And then so how do you know? And the majority of them will jump to these two verses, right? So this is Deuteronomy 28 and 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Right? They'll say, well, the curses, I'm under the curses, my family's cursed, I'm cursed, right? And then the main curse that they'll go to is verse 68, right? Which reads, and Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, right? And Egypt, just so people can understand, right? And I know I've brought this out many times before, just so people can understand, Egypt is the land of bondage, the house of bondage. Doesn't literally mean I'm going to take you into Egypt, right, in Africa. This is Exodus 20 and 2. I am Yahweh thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Egypt, Egyptos, in Greek, it means the house of bondage. It means captivity. It means slavery, right? It's like right here. We're in Egypt right now. Which I'm sure y'all are familiar. The back of the dollar bill. Where did that eagle come from? Right? That pyramid. That's Egypt. They're showing us that we're in Egypt, right? So when it says Egypt is the house of bondage, right? And it says in Deuteronomy 28 and 68, and Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. He's saying, you're going to go back into bondage with what? With ships, right? So a lot of people jump to this verse when it comes to proving so-called Native Americans, Salakia, so-called African Americans, see, we're under this curse. We came on ships, which a lot of them really didn't come on ships. A lot of them are Northern Kingdom. A lot of them are ancestors of so-called Native Americans, right? Which I brought out before. There was a brother that was very contentious with me and very adamant, saying, you're not Israel. Native Americans, Native Mexican, all the natives of this land, they're not Israel. Negroes only are Israel, this, that, and the other. And then he came to find out months later that he was actually, his ancestors on his father's side, his seed line goes back to Native Americans, so-called Native Americans, right? So he switched up on his doctrine real quick. He wasn't about to admit he's not Israel. So he finally accepted, through the Most High, obviously, that the natives of this land are Israel, because he was bearing witness in the spirit that he was Israel, and he found out he was actually native, right? But going back to this, right? It says Spanish traders used the steamboat to transport enslaved indigenous individuals to Cuba. So the Mayans, the same thing happened to the Mayans, right? The Spaniards, the same Edomites that brought some of the so-called African Americans, which are Israelites, to the Americas, were actually taking the Mayans and the indigenous on ships as well to Cuba, to Puerto Rico, to Spain, and back to Europe, right? So you can't say that the curses are proof for so-called African Americans, but then not for the Mexicans. No, right? It's like they say, how does it go? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If I ask you what color is that wall, it's white no matter what, right? No matter the circumstances. Doesn't matter if you're so-called Mexican. Doesn't matter if you're so-called African American. We're going through the same curses, right? So I'm just going to read this real quick. It says, off the coast of Cisal, Mexico, remnants of a 19th century steamboat rest on the ocean floor, overgrown with marine plant life and slowly disintegrating. When divers first discovered the wreck in 2017, its origins were largely a mystery. Now, After 3 years of research, Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, INAH, has finally identified the ship. So it took them 3 years to figure out, look through all the records, right? Okay, what ships were traveling at this time? This ship went down around this year. Where were they traveling to, right? And linked it to a violent chapter in the country's history. Historical documents suggest the vessel is La Unión or La Union, right? La Unión. La Unión, a steamer used to illegally transport enslaved Maya people during the second half of the 19th century, right? They were enslaving the Mayans. The find speaks of an ominous past for Mexico, one that must be recognized and studied according to its context and time, right? So here's the sunken engine of the steamboat, right? This says an iron remnant of the steamboat. Detail of the area where the steamboat's furnace was located, right? See the big pieces. So it says in the statement, underwater archaeologist and lead researcher Helena Barba Meinecki says the find marks the first time researchers have uncovered a vessel associated with the trafficking of Mayas. This is the first time that they've uncovered a ship that was used to traffic the Mayans between 1855 and 1861, right? So this is the Most High bringing things to the light in these last days, right? To solidify and to prove certain things, right? According to his word and according to history, archaeology, all of these things. Spanish trading firm Zangronis Hermanos y Compañía used La Unión to capture and transport about 25 to 30 Mayas to Cuba every month. So that may not seem like a lot, right? You may say, okay, 30 Mayans, that's not much. But every month, so you do 30 times 12, that's 360. That's in 1 year, right? This is 6 years. So 360 times 6, we're talking about almost 2,000 slaves, 2,000 Mayan slaves in this short period of time, right? And this is one boat. This is just one boat that sunk. Who knows how many there were, right? Upon arriving in Cuba, enslaved individuals were sold and forced to work on sugar cane plantations, right? So I'll go ahead and stop there, but y'all can, if y'all want to look at this later, it's the Smithsonian Magazine, right? All you got to put is like Mexico Mayan slave ship or sunken slave ship, right? So yeah, it's a pretty long article. But the point being, going back to the curses, right? One of the curses is you're going to be taken into captivity on ships. Like I said before, if we're using this verse to prove that one people was under the curses, and the same people, so-called African Americans, were saying, oh, well, they were speaking, when they came over here on the slave ships, they were speaking what? They were speaking Hebrew, right? And they came on ships, just like it says. It's the same thing with the Native Americans. You can't say that it solidifies one people, but not these other, right? They both were speaking Hebrew. They both had knowledge of the word, of the Mosaic laws, things of that nature, and they both went into slavery on ships, right? Let me look at the comments real quick. Teach a lot to my madre. I tell her not to look on the internet because of the camps. So for older people, and I know from experience, it's really a turnoff when they see some of these camps. just because the main thing is because of the pride. You know what I mean? The way they teach in pride and the real aggressiveness, you know, of the way that that a lot of them, not all of them, right? But a lot of them teach. Do you have brothers that you can recommend me? I would say, I mean, to be honest with you, the only people that I would recommend at this point is Church of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, the one of their pages, or the brother Hawiyala's page is the Spiritual Art of War here on YouTube. They got some real edifying content, and especially the brother Hawiyala, he has real detailed like history. You know what I mean? Kind of like how we're going through right now. Which, like I said, if we do a part 2 or part 3, part 4, whatever, he's gonna try and get on here as well. But he's got some really good lessons on the natives, Mexicans, the so-called Mexicans and natives as well, right? So Jeremiah 50 and 33, Khan, that's a good verse too, right? And we were actually, I mean, we were bringing out all this at what was it, last weekend, 2 weekends ago, when we were in San Antonio, just talking about how our people, I mean, you could say we're not the same people, but we're going through the same curses. We're going through all the same things. We're being oppressed the same way, right? But that's part of the curses, is to hate your brother, right? So Jeremiah 50 and 33, thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. Right? So Judah being the head tribe of the southern kingdom, and Israel, which was the name for the other tribes, the northern kingdom, right? We were oppressed together, right? And the scriptures say we'll come out of the land of the north together, right? So let's just go back to Deuteronomy 28 real quick. I'm going to point out a couple of things real fast, and I'll probably end it. How long is this so far? We're already over 2.5 hours. Right. So let's read, start on 30, I believe. Actually, we'll start on 27, right? So it's important to remember when you're going through Deuteronomy 28, from 15 on, it's talking about the curses, right? Which I'm sure a lot of y'all are already familiar with. Verse 1 says, if you listen and keep the commandments, these blessings are going to come upon you. You're going to be blessed in the city, blessed in the field, blessed is the fruit of your body, blessed is your basket, blessed is your store. Then you get to 15. It says, if you will not hearken to the voice of Yahweh and do his commandments and statutes, all these curses will come upon you. You'll be cursed in the city, cursed in the field, cursed in your basket, in your store, fruit of your body, all of these curses, right? And it goes on. Curses, 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 curses. Okay? All these curses. You're going to be smitten before your enemies. We just read how many, about 100 million, roughly 100 million so-called Native Americans, Native Mexicans died in order for the United States to be created, right? It says, Yahweh will smite thee with the botch of Egypt and with the emeralds and with the scab, right? I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with that as well. How when the Europeans came over here, they wanted to depopulate or clear out the areas, certain areas where they wanted to make communities. So what did they do? Right? They gave the natives blankets with smallpox, gave them that scab, it gave them that itch, that botch of Egypt, whereof thou canst not be healed. Thousands and thousands of them died, right? Thousands and thousands of them died. Let's look at these 3 verses right here, right? Look at 30, 31, and 32. And then I'll probably I'll go ahead and finish it off, right? Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. So this I mean, we know this happens all the time in our communities. in society in general right now, right? But thinking back to when the natives, what happened with the natives, like we read in Lamentations 5, and like we know throughout history, right? Um, they would kill the men, and they would try to keep the women, right? They would turn them in to their wives or their concubines or whatever you want to call them, right? Sex slaves really is what they were. So you would get a wife, and then or maybe they'll leave you alive, right? Like what was that movie with the native uh 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 Apocalypto, right? How sometimes they'll still stay alive. The men will stay alive. Maybe they'll keep them for sacrifices. Maybe they'll keep them to sell as slaves, keep them as workers, whatever. And then you have another man that's laying with your wife, right? The next one, thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein, right? If you look at just look up the statistics, who are the people that are building the houses in America? The vast majority of them, more often than not, is so-called Mexicans, so-called Hispanics, right? The Israelites, right? And I've talked about this before, but my ribs pops, for example, he's been doing construction since he was a teenager. He's in his 50s now, right? He's built hundreds, if not thousands, of houses, apartments, um, apartment complexes, right? Townhouses, all types of different houses. And guess what? He's never owned his own. He's never owned his own home, right? He's been paying rent his whole life, but he's built hundreds, if not thousands, of houses, right? Why is this? Because the curses, right? Thou shalt plant a vineyard and shall not gather the grapes thereof, right? If you have a 1611 Bible, it has little Hebrew words or terms or meanings. And next to this verse, there's a mosquito in here. Next to this verse, when it says shall not gather, it says for meat. So you will not eat, right? So in other words, you're going to plant, but you're not going to eat. You're not going to eat what you're planting, right? So if we look up, I don't know, something like farm workers by ethnicity. Farm workers demographics. Let's see if we can get one here real quick. If you look at the people that are doing all these laborious jobs, especially down here in what's known as the Valley in South Texas, like look at this. Find the best farm worker jobs for you. Where do you want to work? San Benito, Texas. That's a city close by here, right? There you could get a job here so easily, being a farm worker, right? Very easily. But you're gonna make like $7, maybe if you're lucky, $8 an hour. The most common ethnicity among farm workers is white. So now this is very misleading because it Salakia, it was freezing up there. It was freezing up there. So so this is misleading because when it says farm workers, they count anybody on a farm as a farm worker, right? So if you go to any of the fields, there's many fields around here, and where they grow all types of food, and you'll have maybe a handful of people that look like Edomites or white people, and they're the ones in charge. And then you got 40 or 50. Most of the time they're illegals, right? I'm gonna be real. Most of the time they're illegals. They're from across. They're Mexican or they're Guatemalan, Honduras, El Salvadorian, something like that. But the majority of them are Mexican, right? But you have to understand that they count some people as white either way, right? But let me show y'all something real quick. So it says there are 18.9% of the Hispanic and Latino ethnicity, So they're saying 19% is Hispanic. That's farm workers. But then, check this out. The chart below shows that 72.6 of farm workers speak Spanish. So how are you telling me that 73% of the farm workers are white, but then 73% of them speak Spanish? You know what I'm saying? That number is definitely off. That number is definitely off. Right? So even if we look at this, bachelors, they're saying that farm workers, 27% of them have their bachelor's degree. That means that they're most likely from the United States, and the majority of them aren't Israel, right? So we could take off that 27% already. That's like the higher up people that are maybe they're running things. You know what I'm saying? But I had seen another chart. Let's see, agricultural workers. I think it was this one actually. NCFH. Let me just look at this real quick. All right, so check this out. It says birthplace and ethnicity. The majority, 73%. This is exactly what the last chart just said. 73% of them were white, right? This says the majority, 73% of all agricultural workers were foreign born. So that other chart was BS, man. That other chart was BS. 69% of all agricultural workers were born in Mexico, right? Were born in Mexico. That means 70%, right, were born in Mexico. So going back to Deuteronomy, when it says, thou shalt plant a vineyard and shall not eat the grapes thereof. And like I said, in the Hebrew, it says, you shall not have them as meat. In other words, you're going to grow stuff, but you ain't going to get to eat from it, right? This is another huge curse that me personally, I see all around here because of the area that I live in, South Texas. There's a lot of crops. And when it's time to pick, when it's time to harvest, they do that by hand. You know what I'm saying? They do it by hand. And I could tell you that 70% Mexican, that's probably even low in this area because we're, 15 minutes away from the border, from the southeast border in the United States, right? So this one says, thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. This is another curse. This is another curse that happened to the Native Americans. Native American, so that when they were trying to kill off the Lakota, the Lakota tribe, right, or tribes of Native Americans, they figured out all we have to do is take away their food source, right? So what did the Edomites do? And the Sioux, right? There was many tribes, but I believe it started with the Lakota, if I'm not mistaken. And then the Sioux, the Comanche, there was many tribes that they did this to, right? Let me see. So this is a quote, right? We were never able to control the savages, in other words, the natives, until their supply of meat was cut off. So they cut off their supply of food. This is what the Europeans, so-called Caucasians, the Edomites did, right? This is what they did. These are all skulls. If y'all haven't seen this picture before, I suggest y'all look it up as well. U.S. buffalo slaughter summarized in one shocking photo. Look at all these skulls, man. And if you see the whole photo or multiple photos, this part right here, it makes like a wall. It just keeps going. They were killing them. They were killing any and all buffalo. right? They were even paying people to kill as many buffalo as they can so that the natives wouldn't have a food source, right? It's another one right here, right? It says Canadian Pacific, because they were doing this throughout what's known as Canada as well, right? This is a curse. This is a curse. Deuteronomy 28 and 31, thine ox, which is in the same family as a buffalo, shall be slain before thine enemies, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Right? This is exactly what happened. We'll just get one more verse. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand. Right? Your sons and your daughters are going to be given to another people. Right? This has been happening for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Right? Catholic Native School. So as some of y'all probably have seen, the Native American or Indian boarding schools was a huge business for the Edomites. A huge business. So let me pull up a bigger one. So this was one of the most well-known boarding schools. Pipestone Boarding School. Okay. These are all indigenous, so-called Native American children. This is in 1892. This was happening previous to this. This was happening after this. This is still happening to this day, except now they keep them in cages, right? This is a curse. This is all a curse. Look at all these children without parents. This is a curse. Deuteronomy 28 and 32, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long. You're gonna want your children. You're gonna long for them, and there shall be no might in thy hand. But guess what? There's no power for you to do anything about it. Can't do nothing about it. Because these damn devils, these Catholic devils, were stealing children and colonizing them physically, mentally, spiritually, right? And making them to take on all the traditions and all of the heathen customs of the Catholic Church, right? School didn't close till 1952. That's what, 60 years? You know how many children went through that school? That's just one of them. Some of the tribes that were there. I don't know why that's on there. Right? This is just one example. But if you look into it, there was so many. There was a bunch of schools like this. A bunch of schools. And I don't know if y'all saw that I posted yesterday or the day before how they found in Canada over 200 bodies or skeletons of children remains. Right? 215. It's right here. 215 indigenous children's skeletons that they found under one of the boarding schools. It was a indigenous residential school. Mass grave of 215 children found. You think these indigenous people, the parents of these children, willingly put their children into these schools? Of course not. They were cursed. Their sons and their daughters were given to another people, and I'm sure their eyes were failing and longing for them all the day long. And there was no might in their hands. There was nothing that they could do about it. Right? And this is still what's happening to this day. right? Some people will say, well, that was 100 years ago. 100 years isn't a long time. My grandma just passed away a few months ago, and she was 89, 88 or 89. You know what I'm talking about? That's just a couple lifetimes back. But that's still happening to this day. What do they do with the children now? Keeping them in cages. When they first come across, this is what's happening, right? Keeping them in cages. And now some people will say, well, it's not really like that. That's not true. I can tell you from experience that me and my rib worked at a place called BCFS. It was it was at the time, it was a few years back. At the time, it was the largest underage immigrant housing facility in the United States. It held like 600 children at a time, right? And they're not kept in cages, but they're kept there against their will, right? The majority of them are crying and sad, and they miss their family. They want to go home, this, that, and the other. But the other thing about it is, one of the dudes that works there that was higher up, he would say, because that was only for males, right? And he was saying that a lot of the times what was happening was they'll come over here, right? They'll come over here with family members, and they get separated right away. And then they can't find their family members. It's like if they disappear, right? And a lot of the times it's the females that disappear for obvious reasons, right? Sex trafficking and other things of that nature, sex slavery, all that type of stuff. And so basically what he was saying is, at that point in time, which was a few years back, I believe it was like 80 to 90% of the people that were being held, underage immigrant children, which is up to 17, right? As soon as they would turn 18, they would come and pick them up. They would have police come and pick them up on their birthday, right? The boys, and take them to the actual immigrant jail, right? For adults on their birthday, man. Which I know we don't celebrate birthdays, but imagine that. But the point I'm making is, he was saying 80 to 90% of the population of underage immigrants was boys, right? Or males. And he was saying that we don't know how many of these females, underage females, are getting kidnapped, getting put into sex trafficking, getting stolen by coyotes, is what they call them, or the people that bring them across, or by Americans, right? Because they've caught Border Patrol through being involved in that type of thing as well, right? But that all just goes back to what? It all goes back to the curses, right? Goes back to the curses. Thy son and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand, right? So all these curses, why are the curses on us? Of course, for breaking the commandments, but there's another reason. This is why right here. And I'm going to go ahead and finish with this. Y'all have any questions or anything like that? Put it in the next minute or two. It says Deuteronomy 28 and 46. And they, what is they? The curses. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. The curses are upon us for a sign. So it's like I said earlier, when I ask certain people that, like Negro only Israelites, for example, ask, how do you know you're an Israelite? Well, because the curses. That's true. The curses are a sign to show you who Israel is. Like you're on the highway and there's a sign that says, get off right here. There's a Walmart. You know there's a Walmart. There's a Walmart sign. Same thing with the curses. They're a sign. There's too many signs, too many curses on our people, too much archaeology, too much history, too much curses and biblical signs. And when we wonder, are we Israelites? There's too many of these signs that are upon us and upon our seed for us to, for anybody with logical thinking to think that that we're not Israelites, right? That we are not Israel, right? I'm actually going to finish with this one. Romans 8:16. For to be carnally minded is death. Or 8:6, Salakia. And now I'm going to go to 16. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Right? You can't think carnally. A carnal mind leads to death. There's a lot of people thinking carnally out here. You know what, nah, you're not dark enough. You need like 2 more shades and maybe you could be Israel. That's carnal, man. That's carnal. It's like the brother Azariah that was on here earlier. I remember one time he said, like, so what shade exactly then? How dark do you have to be in order to be an Israelite according to Negro only? Right? That's completely carnal, right? But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. So we got to think spiritual. This word is spiritual. Everything that the Most High set up is spiritual. Even the curses, right? He's making the curses happen through his spirit. So when it comes to this, yes, we can see all these signs and all these things physically, right? But what it comes down to is this. Romans 8:16. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit. The Holy Spirit itself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. So when I first came into this thing, and at first I was like, what? Israelites, blah, blah, blah. And then I started seeing the curses, and I was like, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And then I saw Issachar as a strong ass, couching down between 2 birds. Like, that just made so much. That bared witness with my spirit. Me, my family, the curses. And then once I got the history and the archaeology and all these educational non-secular references, there's no denying it. You know what I mean? There's no denying it. So let me go up. You the only one I told her to follow. I'll praise the Most High. I always ask the Most High, why is it that this truth got to be revealed like this? Hey, because I'm assuming that you mean like how the camps bring it out, right? Because you do have to understand that Christianity in general, I mean, for our people, the last, say, 50 years, maybe 60 years, it's been more of a just watered down, just, I mean, it all throughout history it was like that. But especially the last 10, 20, 30 years, it's more of this like just love doctrine and a prosperity gospel, and as long as you're doing good in life and all these things. So I do understand when brothers bring it out in a tough, in a straightforward, in your face type of way. But we also have to understand that there's a time and a place for everything. And you have to know how to answer different people. You know what I'm saying? Like in Jude, I think it's 21 and 22, how it says, some you save with compassion, some you save with fear, right? The older population, like say your mom, my tias, the older generation, they're not gonna go for that real tough, real in your face type of preaching. That's just not the way that's gonna happen. You're gonna need more compassion, right? When it comes to teaching them the truth, because they come from a more generation of respect. This generation don't respect nothing. You know what I mean? So you got to be in their face. You gotta give it to them like that a lot of times. But for that older generation, I say it's like this. Jude 1:22, and of some have compassion. Some you got to be more compassionate, right? Look, mom, this is the reasons why we're going through these things as a people. Like, look, we're going through these curses. Our family went through these curses. It's because we're not following the word. We got to come back to his laws. We gotta love the Most High. 1 John 5:3 says we got to keep the commandments. That's loving him, right? The older generation, that's more how, from my experience, how you're gonna bring them in. Of some have compassion, making a difference, and others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garment spotted with the flesh. Other people, a lot of, especially this younger generation, again speaking from experience, you gotta save them with fear. You gotta try to be used by the Most High to put the fear of the Most High in them, right? Khan. So they kidnapped kids to make human meat. Khan. That's something else a lot of people don't know about or will even believe, right? But there's even the Jewish, the Revelation 2:9-3:9 Jewish people that admit to that, right? Admit to doing that, right? But I guess I'm gonna go ahead and end it with that. But I'll end with the same verse that we started with, right? Same verse we started with, Job 8:8. For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of thy fathers. So if you can figure out the seed line of your father, right? Because it does go off the seed of your father, according to Numbers, the first chapter. try to find out. But if not, don't worry about it, right? Don't worry about it. The Spirit is going to bear witness with your spirit that you are Israel. You've been going through the curses all your life. When you do something bad and then you go through a curse and you know, and like, man, I broke this command. I went against the Most High like this. Now look, this curse is happening to me. That is the Spirit of the Most High bearing witness with your spirit that you are Israel, right? So with that, I will do a part 2, Most High willing, soon, maybe even a part 3. But with that, I give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. I want to say Shalom and Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai Barakatah. To all you brothers and sisters out there that are trying to live out this truth in sincerity and in humility, right? Humility is a huge thing. So Shalom and Barakatah. Y'all stay in the spirit till next